I know, it's such a small world.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been emailing with her too. Yeah, and I have no idea what she looked like either. So what do you? Yeah. I'm going to the policies to encourage broadband and Massachusetts Internet Society Charter. So it should be interesting. Yeah.
There's all of the good things right.
Yeah, I know. There's so much stuff going on. Yeah, there's yeah.
Like at the same time.
Now I have internet.
Yeah, that was really good. Yeah. Actually, our so she's actually, I should introduce you guys. So she is heading our new. We have a partnership now with CETA to do gender work. So you know how we have the web index and the affordable index, and we're trying to incorporate more like gender indicators, gender research. So she's kind of setting that up. Yeah, or coordinating that. Yeah. Yeah, she's new in this, so she just started, and she's based at Cape. Yeah.
I will right here $2,000.
Yeah. And that's that new. And she was really interested in learning about the clients that you guys have. It was like Crusade and
So because you're backlit by the window?
I don't know if there's any way to do it.
Well, Boston's have an obsession with this in terms of writing. Most places are writing, and it's like, want to be visible over here, eye level with the professor. And all this. I never knew what to make of it.
Running around. There you go.
Yes.
How are you doing?
Have a seat wherever. IGF. Person came up to me, sitting next to me, and introduced himself. I've known you this sort of goes, we actually know each other, but we're just like little fake little things. And then we actually met, we had a very nice conversation. He's involved in the U.S. mission.
It's like the scene in Taiwan. No, yes, of course.
approximately active to another one to have 12.5. Who are basically represent this. Basically just
There are a lot of issues that arise from having fluctuation.
and is there anything that makes that more expensive? There it's also but there's I don't know. I should know. I saw the people speaking and all that. I was told we sort of we want to figure out how the conversation is. We're all finding out what
Do you know seniority?
Oh, that's right. I'm sure. Looking for human workers. Definitely.
I saw you send out a national Coaltion.
Yes.
I do always think it worked.
It's been so much money. This is, they did want to get because renewables are professional.
He might still work in this whole place. They did, I'm just not sure if it's still.
Well, it should be.
Yeah, the some different power, some different power.
It's all right, I have enough juice, I'll make it. Very odd. Do you have time? You went straight to the wall. You were smart. And you did really well. I think he said that doesn't have to so I think that will be attached to this one. So if you have power there, everything is fine for representation.
What I was going to do is unplug this one and plug it into this power.
Oh.
Plug in and
that'll
find
work.
the end of it.
This is the end of that one. That'll work. That won't work. Let's see if I can do it better. Let's see. It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
No, we could just turn that into this outlet. Right down.
news factor changing out of nowhere, but was there something that just came out of nowhere? What did you talk about? After arguing all the speech, I started talking about oh, thank you very much. You know, Laura's an artist, Madura.
Was it there was an email yesterday saying, oh, you know, but all my book results do. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Live Neutrality. Thanks very much.
Ben dışarıdayım zaten. Şuradan şirket dışında. Şeye de bakalım.
So I'll be here.
And then those is right. No. Then it's holy blood. No bullshit. They go they do.
Well, she will come and give it to you.
They specify it.
I hope so.
She should tell you. Hey.
So I find it vague. Okay. We should take Wi-Fi to my German speed. It's the better one.
Thank you. So, I went to the IGF.
One thing I like is
You're clearly way ahead of the curve.
I didn't get on the first one.
This fancy thing about going to be.
But not everyone should do it.
That's true. We should stop saying that people.
Hey, thank you.
There was one between, but then you have to go all the way back. I think this worksheet is just
This is exactly the same. Now, we're just making the market meeting and current generations.
Do you the microphone is here?
Videos? Or maybe this, no? Just
Video player the video will be this screen.
How many microphones do you have?
I don't work.
Sorry. Your microphones are working?
Yes, but we are 7, and I prefer to stand up maybe.
Açık değil abi.
7, I think.
Şey yapmasan açık istiyorsan. Şimdi gidiyor ya Allah'ım yarabbim. It is working now.
Thank you. It's better. It's more handy to have a.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
This should be interesting.
Yeah.
Lots of familiar faces.
Yes, indeed. So we're starting with
I assume you don't want me to go on for too long.
well, if you can stay in less than 10 minutes.
10 is easy. Not a problem. 5 is hard. 10.
I know what 5 is for. Was it easy to find the room? Kind of.
It's actually easier to find this one than some of the others that are several floors further
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, but this is in another building, so
Well, that's
it's
the other
not
thing.
really very handy to do. And it's
This is a way of training us to improve our spatial memory,
yeah.
where things are in 3 dimensions. Yeah. Alex? How do? we use that. Okay.
Yeah, because it is not very energy. Okay, good morning. I think we can get started. So welcome to the annual meeting of the Dynamic Coalition on Network Neutrality. My name is Luca Belle, I work for the Council of Europe, and also I'm affiliated to Université Paris 2, Paris 2 University, and I will have the honor to moderate this session. We will discuss the annual report of the Dynamic Coalition. You can find some hard copies of the report in the room, and it will be online by the end of the day on networkneutrality.info. So let me introduce you the distinguished panelists that will help us in this travel into network neutrality. So first of all, Vint Cerf, who is Vice President and Chief Internet Evangelist at Google, and also known as one of the fathers of the Internet. Then Chris Riley, that is Senior Policy Engineer at Mozilla. Then we have Rosen Layton, who is a researcher at the Aalborg University. Then we have Patricia Vargas Leon, who is PhD candidate at Syracuse University in Information Studies. Ornulf Storm from the Norwegian Telecommunication Authority, who will be representing Frode Sorensen, who authored his contribution for this report. And last but not least, Alejandro Pisanti, who is Director General for Academic Computing Services at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. So this year report is dedicated to the various regulatory debates that are going on around the world on net neutrality. Last year we dedicated the report to net neutrality and human rights. The report has been read by quite a few people and has had an inspiring role also for the European Parliament that took inspiration when he adopted the first reading of the Connected Continent regulation. This is one of many regulatory debates that are going on right now around the world on net neutrality. The 2014 has been a very intense year for net neutrality debates. It started with the invalidation of the Open Internet Report and Order in January. Then the European Parliament adopted its first reading, but that process is not finished at all. And then the Marco Civil, this landmark law, was adopted by Brazil. And so today we will have the opportunity to explore these aspects and other aspects of all the regulatory debate online. Just one second. I also forgot to say that we have our remote moderator, which is Alexandra Permikova, that will remote moderate. And so remote moderation is available at any time. And we will have, if technical issues allows us to have it, we will have a remote intervention from Australia by Angela Daly, which is a researcher at Swinburne University. So I would like to start with Vint Cerf, who, being one of the fathers of the Internet, is in the good perspective to provide us some good thoughts on net neutrality.
Thank you. Do you mind if I get up and walk around? First of all, I've been asked not to go on longer than 10 minutes, so I will try very hard to keep within that limit. Let me start out by saying that my view of network neutrality begins in the United States, which is where the debate began, at least where I live. The issue really had to do with consumer choice. The question is, are the consumers in charge of where they go on the internet and what they do with it? And the issue arose that there was not a great deal of competition for broadband service in the US. And in fact, in many cases, you had, if you were lucky, a choice of two broadband providers. Typically, one was a cable provider and the other one was a telco. In some more common cases, you had only one choice of one or the other. And in the rural parts of America, you often had no choice because there wasn't any broadband available. So the debate arose about provision of broadband, competition, and user choice. And the question was whether the provider of broadband service to a consumer like you and me could arbitrarily control where I could go in the internet and what I could do there. And there were arguments made by some of the providers of broadband service that somehow or other they should be able to charge suppliers of content that the users wanted to go to for the privilege of delivering that content to the users of the broadband service, notwithstanding the fact that the broadband provider was already charging the user for access to the internet. And so the worry arose that the providers of the broadband service would in fact interfere with and potentially limit the ability of a user to go somewhere on the internet and get something done or obtain some content. To make matters worse, the problem also came up that the users might not actually be able to take advantage of what was being offered, because in the interior of the network there could very well be congestion. So you can imagine the following scenario. A provider is told by an internet service provider, you have to pay us. In addition to getting onto the internet yourself, you have to pay us at the other end in order to reach your users. And oh, by the way, we can't guarantee that that will make any difference because there may be congestion in the middle of the net about which we can do nothing. So this was not a very good scenario at all. I think that the most important outcome of this debate is to try to assure that the users really do have choice. Moreover, when you don't have enough competition, so users have the choice of moving from one provider to another, then you have to ask whether there is a regulatory role to be played to assure that the playing field is even, and that the users have the ability to do what they want, and if they don't get the service they want, then they can get it from someone else, or the regulator helps to make sure that they can get access to what they are expecting to reach. So that's basically the picture in the United States. The question of anti-competitive behavior was a very heavy focus. Here's another example. Suppose that you're in the business of providing broadband services, but in addition you are providing, let's say, streaming video services on your network to the users. So you have a vertical service that includes video service, maybe even telephone service, plus broadband internet access. And on the broadband channel, some competitor in the internet is also providing services like streaming video, and you conclude that you could interfere with that competitor by delivering poorer quality service to the users for anything except your own video services. That's an anti-competitive example, and that too was a worry. So at this stage of the game, there are debates all over the world about what does net neutrality mean, and I want to finish this introduction by saying, first of all, it does not mean that every packet has to be treated exactly the same way. It's understood that there are some services that need low latency, there are other services that need high capacity. The point is that if the service requires one of those features, any service should have equal opportunity to get access to that kind of service, as opposed to the provider of broadband services picking and choosing which of the suppliers of service will get that extra capacity or get that low latency. So once again, it's very important that we have equal opportunity to get access to these services. Finally, there was an argument that some people made that net neutrality meant that you couldn't charge for more usage. That's also not my position anyway. If you use more of the capacity, it's understandable that you might actually have to pay more. The important point here is that the unit of service that is at stake here is bandwidth. How much data are you moving and how quickly? There's a big difference between moving a terabyte of data in a month and moving a terabyte of data in a minute. And the two moving a terabyte in a minute really consumes a lot of bandwidth. And so you could imagine in a congested system that the supplier of service, to try to be fair, will offer more capacity to someone who paid more and less capacity to someone who paid less. That's not a violation of net neutrality. That's a very reasonable position to take because it's a fair allocation of resource. So I'll stop there. There is more to be said, which we are going to hear from the panelists with different perspectives on how the net neutrality debate is showing up in different jurisdictions around the world. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks. Thanks for this very insightful.
For the FCC in that. I would argue there's 3 key areas of debate in the U.S. regulatory process now, 2 of which have resonance globally and 1 of which doesn't. So the first of these is prioritization. What does it look like? What does it mean for other services? How is it engineered? What are the repercussions of the different ways in which it's engineered in a network? And what is the right role of a regulator in setting limits on that or not? And there's a lot of active discussion of that at the FCC and in these processes right now. The second is mobile. Mobile networks are different. They have different infrastructure. So the question is, should the rules be different, and if so, how? And there's a lot of active discussion about this. We also have a big, pretty well-established part of the American regulatory framework called reasonable network management. It has echoes in other environments as well. And so there's a question of whether the rules or the scope of reasonable network management need to change or be applied differently in mobile networks to allow for things like different management of upload congestion and mobility and bouncing between cell site to cell site and so forth that arise there. And the third thing that is, in my view, the most active in the US right now is the question of authority. I think this one is a little bit unique to by the end of this calendar year. I don't know what those rules will look like, and that's not just my public messaging. Like, I really don't know what the outcome of this is going to be, which is one of the reasons why this is a really interesting process in the United States right now. But I think regardless of what the outcomes are in the US, it will have echoes in the EU and in other environments where network neutrality is an active issue.
Yeah, thank you. And so could you also elaborate a little bit of on how paid prioritization and mobile traffic management can, what are the influence that those issues can have out of the US in a global perspective?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think these are network management practices and challenges and opportunities that are being seen by network operators everywhere. I mean, the mobile infrastructure, you know, it sort of works the same way no matter where you are. You have backhaul connections that are powering cell towers that are driving data and download and upload tune from the cell phone. So the sort of unique features of network management in mobile are unique features in network management everywhere. So if the United States rules come out and say, we can have the same network neutrality rules for both types of systems, but interpret the concept of reasonable network management differently to allow for the things the carriers need to do, that happens to be Mozilla's position in this debate. I think that will set a precedent for other environments. On the other hand, if the FCC comes out and says, we have different rules, depending on how they say that and what explanation they use for that, that could also have a precedential effect, I believe, in other jurisdictions, just because the networks are the same everywhere. And I'd argue comparable in the prioritization debate. I mean, there's a big engineering background and context here, and the business practices are different, the technologies are different. I don't know exactly, you know, how big the effect will be, but I think there's at the very least a potential for impact. In a way, there's not with the authority question, or not to the same degree.
Excellent. So thank you. And before passing to the analysis of other regulatory approaches in Europe and Latin America, it is interesting to make a step back and analyze the theories that underpin net neutrality. So Rosliden has authored an interesting paper on an empirical assessment of the various innovation theories that underpin net neutrality. So why it is important to analyze, to test these theories?
Try it one more time.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. Well, I think one of the themes of this conference is the different approaches of net neutrality around the world, and it certainly gives it's a wonderful opportunity for an academic such as myself to provide a test. So those of us who are getting our PhD, like myself and Patricia, we actually have a wonderful ground of where we see situations where net neutrality rules have been applied. So we can actually test, are the policy goals delivered through the various legislation. Now, obviously, something we'd love to see is that if, in fact, the net neutrality logic is followed, then we would see, you know, the next Google would come from the Netherlands, and there would be a boom in investment in Slovenia, and the people of Chile would say that, you know, their human rights have improved because of, with the imposition of a net neutrality rule. So the paper that I have prepared for this conference is looking at what is called the virtuous circle of innovation. It's a theory of innovation suggested by the Federal Communications Commission in their 2010 net neutrality rule. And it holds that in a state of net neutrality, there will be a flourishing of content and applications which are desired by users who purchase internet subscriptions, the revenue of which goes to operators who then invest in network. Now, it seems like a very straightforward cycle, and it is sort of fulfilling and going around. So that seems on the surface very intuitive, and it should be easy enough to prove. So I'm in the process of building this to look at that, and then the various data that would go into that. And so what I talk about is some of the challenges that you will need to address when you look at the data. Obviously, regulators are interested in these kinds of things. Before they make a law, they want to see, does it deliver on what it said? So just to give you some highlights, things like some of the challenges of this are the net neutrality rules differ in all of the countries. It's defined differently, the way that if it's a single law versus part of an omnibus law. We see different market compositions. Another challenge is that one of the key measures you would look at is capital expenditure. Accounting rules are different for different companies or different countries, so some things could be included, like, let's say, subsidy for a mobile phone in one country and not in another. That will change the data to some extent. The other challenge with this theory is that it doesn't take into account the efficiency developments in networks. So, for example, 10 years ago, maybe we could buy a router for $100,000. Today, it may be much less. So it also, for example, network sharing. Two operators could share the same mobile mast. So one of the things you could see is maybe less infrastructure expenditure, but more efficient use of the network. The other challenge with the theory is it's not taking into account the application side. So right now, there's an explosion of companies involved in content delivery, not just of CDNs and cloud delivery, but things like video compression and video encoding. So, vast majority of the world's video content is not encoded very well. So it's kind of, it's very bulky to deliver. If you can improve the encoding of the content, the user can have a better experience, and this takes up less network. So the same network could deliver more content if you encode the data better. So we also saw something with Facebook where they improved their mobile platform, where it once took up 14 megabits of your mobile data. Today, it's less than 1/5. Now, a lot of that is because the world's total pie has grown, but the EU as a whole has not been able to keep up. But when we look at the country levels in various European countries, we see a different story. So we can see in the Netherlands, which has a net neutrality law, very high investment. It has been high historically. But we can look to another country like Denmark, which also has high investment, but no net neutrality rule. And it's specifically been the policy there to use a multi-stakeholder model in lieu of making a law, because it was unclear that the law was necessary. So to me, the takeaway is, there's really not a strong conclusion here either way. It needs to have more data and study, but it also shows the value of a multi-stakeholder approach to managing net neutrality. And I think the fact that we have such a wonderful attendance at this kind of event gives a lot of credence to this sort of model where you can bring stakeholders together, and that could have some impact to influencing firm behavior and perhaps deterring what could be the possible projected abuses.
Thanks a lot, Rosalind, and I'm sure that your presentation will trigger some reply. And yes. So, yeah. So before the replies, I would like to keep on with the regulatory approaches that have been adopted so far. Particularly, Patricia analyzed some approaches adopted in Latin America. But those approaches have been criticized because some of the provision contain some not clear specific terms, such as arbitrary or non-arbitrary, licit or legal special services. Or
in the word arbitrary means something that lacks of justification with no motive or cause, or when it is just the result of someone's will. This is also a very general definition, but it's being followed by the Chilean regulator. Specifically, the critique goes in the sense that although ISPs cannot act arbitrarily, they can act by justified reasons, because in that case, they are allowed to act interfering in the internet traffic. This is not being written in the law, is not in the administrative regulation, but it's been raised as a concern by policymakers, and it's also stated by some of the internet service providers. So we do not only have the possibility of having internet service providers defining what is arbitrary or non-arbitrary, but also the possibility of having multiple approaches, because each country has more than one internet service provider. In the specific case of the Colombian legislation, there's a word, two words called special services. Special services according to the needs of the market. This is related to the mobile service. The legislation gives the possibility to the internet service providers of giving special services mostly connected to chat services or social networks, social platforms in the mobile devices. In this case, this practice has been explicitly forbidden by the Chilean legislation, and the Peruvian does not mention anything about it. Regarding the words legal or licit, the three legislations specifically mention that the internet access is a right as long as it has licit purposes. And the internet service providers also understand that they are in capacity of decide when an activity is legal or not. If it is not legal, like for instance, somebody who is acting against the intellectual property rights, they will be entitled to act in the internet traffic. Whether this is legal or not, it will be later on defined and ruled by the regulator.
Thanks.
So,
has not been published yet. We don't know what.
Okay. Yeah. So also the legal powers of the telecom regulation vary from one country to another. Do you want to elaborate more on the legal powers of the various regulator, or maybe we can keep on following on that after and have the perspective of Arnold Storm from the Norwegian telecom authority that has adopted a co-regulatory approach since 2009. So they have quite a long-term, long-standing experience in regulation and co-regulation. So you are in Norway. You are arguing for a service model for net neutrality, distinguishing internet access service and specialized services. So what is why it is useful for regulatory purposes to distinguish between internet access and specialized services?
Yes, thank you. First, yes, I'm Ernest Storm from the Norwegian telecom regulator. I think also I just want to comment briefly at the start. Our goal as the regulator is also very much in correlation with Vince touched upon, that we as a regulator want consumer choice, availability of broadband services, and competition. That's our main goal as the regulators are exempted from net neutrality. It is paramount that the specialized services are clearly separated from the internet access service, so to ensure that the internet traffic is not degraded. So that's the purpose of that model.
Yeah. So the issue that you are stressing is that with a clear separation, it could be technical or logical separation. Actually, the provision of assured quality specialized services does not impinge upon the quality of the open access internet. So how can these specialized services can be provided without degrading internet access services?
Well, the quality of service to these specialized services are not secured by giving these services an explicit higher priority level than the regular internet access service, but rather by having adequate capacity reserved for the specialized services without this being done at the expense of the internet traffic. So internet traffic has its own capacity scaled according to the contractual agreements, access speed, but of course course, that does not mean that it always will get that speed, of course, but that's so it should be separated.
Okay, excellent. And speaking about unexpected consequences, what kind of unexpected, unintended consequences could lead to an unclear definition of specialized services?
Well, since the whole idea underpinning net neutrality is to ensure the equal treatment of traffic.
And very glad that the meeting has had such a good calling power, convening power. To your question, there was a major constitutional level legal reform of telecommunications law in Mexico, which is very significant. And now we also have most of the secondary legislation, the actual rules that will apply in the market. As the part you mentioned, which is must carry, must offer, was introduced now for the television and cable markets, for the broadcast and cable television markets, which is very significant. I don't want to dwell that much in that. Second, there's a very significant consideration here, starting from Vince's statements about the US. There's an excellent presentation and the paper about 5 years old by Scott Marcus, which tells us why the economics of network neutrality is so different between Europe and the US. And when we start doing activism for network neutrality in places like Brazil or Mexico, etc., we should really look at the whole history, compare with our own history, and see what we actually want to achieve. I would just like to mention from today, well, this happened yesterday. Well, the economic forces are a major attempt by the government to reshuffle the markets. So the explicit aim of the legislation, of the telecoms legislation altogether, is to open up for competition. This has meant mostly going after the incumbent telco ISP, which is called Telmex or América Móvil, and is owned by a well-known character named Carlos Slim, richest or second richest man of the world at this time. But there's also a very influential company, and you know the other major to listen. They are telling us things like, we don't have the capacity to provide all the traffic without making investments. And the users, this takes us to think twice about what we're demanding when we demand network neutrality. When we demand network neutrality, we are asking for some kind of lost paradise, some paradise lost in the past. And really, network neutrality was lost much longer ago than when telcos came in. In many technical senses, the networks have been managed if you run an innovation. So the telcos are saying they need freedom. They cannot be constrained by network neutrality, because network neutrality impedes innovation in the telco market. And to a certain extent, this may be true depending on how you write the network neutrality rules. And on the other hand, you have, on one side, large companies like Google.
And although net neutrality has been considered in the context of various government consultations here, particularly regarding the national broadband network, there are no plans at the moment to introduce any further or any net neutrality regulations here beyond what we have already, the telecoms regulation and competition law, which is very similar to competition law. In various parts of the country, particularly the remote and rural areas, there's a lot less competition, and there may be very limited choice of internet service provider. Particularly, there may only be a choice of Telstra, in fact. So very quickly, I suppose my analysis of the situation here is that net neutrality has not really been a debate at the forefront of internet policy in Australia, and there's actually what's been going on with the national broadband network here is quite interesting. It's been a big political football, and we're not entirely sure what model will finally be rolled out, but it's interesting that the original model, which would be fibre to the home, would seem to have potentially rendered content delivery networks unnecessary, as there would have been so much capacity that really there wouldn't have been a great advantage in using them. But that's all very uncertain now. There's been a change of government here last year, which wants to roll out a less fast model, and so we may also see some content delivery networks proving problematic for net neutrality here as well.
Okay,
in broadband optical fiber networks that operate at a gigabit per second compared to everything else that's something like at least 10 times faster at what I think are pretty competitive rates. But competition is still an issue. Mr. Chairman, if I'd be allowed to make one or two more responses. One thing I worry greatly about is that the model of the internet that I grew up with anyway, and I guess I can say that, is that you paid to get access to the network and then you talked to each other and you did whatever it was you were going to do. This notion of two-sided market, I think, is actually kind of as open as possible. Then new kinds of protocols can be invented to sit on top of the internet protocol layer, which is itself extraordinarily neutral. It has no idea how the packets are being carried, and it has no idea what the bits mean inside the packet. So we should retain that stupidity, because what it allows is new applications to be invented and new transport technologies to be inserted into this expanding and evolving internet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks a lot, and I guess there is an immediate reply from Rosalind.
So I want to say at the outset, I think if many people, if you told them, well, you can have 8,000 choices of DSL today, I don't know if so many users be happy with that. They'd like the opportunity to take their broadband in a mobile phone when they go somewhere. Maybe they like to have it in cable. Maybe they like satellite. So I look at competition as a technology choice, not necessarily number of competitors.
I'm sorry if I must intervene at this point, because the difference between us is not that there are different technologies, what to absolutely acknowledge. It's what technologies do you as a user have the choice to use? That is the key question, and that's where I don't think there is adequate competition, because as a user, as each one of you, at least those of you who live in the US, will know, is that at your residence you don't have as many choices as we used to have. I only have 2. And I'm lucky because I live in an urban area. For people who live farther out or who live in the rural parts of the country, they don't have choice despite the existence of the technology. If they don't have access to it, it's not of any use to them and it isn't competitive.
Thanks a lot for these very passionate reactions. And so I think Alejandro maybe first, then Chris.
Not very internet literate grandmother in the US looking for a hamburger joint, use Bing, for everything else. You said it, Rosalind, right? You use Google, but it's open in this sense. The layer, access to innovation in the layer only requires software and much smaller investments of capital than you need in the infrastructure, and therefore we have to work with them very differently.
Yes, thanks for highlighting the difference between infrastructure and content applications, market and innovation. And I think Chris had some replies, and then
I mostly really liked what Alejandro started talking with about the principles here.
Have regulations on allowing for the main infrastructure owners to get access to other competitors on their own infrastructure, and that's very important for having broadband competition. The same in the mobile phone area with virtual operators. Even though you have just a few physical networks, you have virtual operators and competition. But just a comment to also what Alejandro mentioned, that some says that net neutrality impedes the innovation in the telco market. And in our view, the service model, as we have mentioned, I think addresses and actually preserves the innovative force that the internet has, and also it ensures the innovation in the specialized services applications as well. So you need to have that coexistence and allow that without having a degraded internet access service. Thank you.
So now, if there are no more reactions from the panel, I would like to open the discussion to this huge floor. So raise your hands. We have a lot of hands. I would like to start with the gentleman here. You, sir. Okay. Oh, is there someone here with another mic? Because the room is quite big.
We actually reduce the load on the network. If the source of the content is somewhere in a distant part of the internet, and you have to repeatedly carry the same information over the infrastructure of the internet on a global scale to deliver to a particular user, a CDN can be tremendously helpful in reducing the load on the net and delivering better quality service to the users. And there are lots of different ways to achieve that effect. Some of the network providers build their own CDNs. Some of the network providers arrange for Akamai to put its facilities either in the head end or in the central office, or in the case of Akamai, in many cases it's not in either one. They just built the servers to be all around the world, attached to many of the networks that are access networks that deliver traffic to the end users. I don't see this as any different from physical facilities in order to deliver product to the users. I'm not even sure what outcome you would like other than the current business motivation for making the investment to provide better quality service to the users who are subscribing to it. In the case of Akamai, it's frequently the case that the source of the content is paying Akamai to deliver that content more readily. And that's a perfectly good business model. It worked very well for them. In the case
for a moment, and how are you going to allocate blame in order to have regulatory teeth? These are very practical questions. Your question, Michael, is very practical because it means that if we don't have the expertise when we go, let's say, from civil society and the technical community to these discussions with the government and the companies, it's very easy to dismiss us. It's very easy for them to dismiss us by ignoring, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know how complex the job of network management is, and what you're asking from us is very ill-defined. We cannot provide it. Give us a good engineering question that we can test, and we can let you measure inside our network, and then we'll give you something. But it comes back to, one of the ways it comes back to is the service level agreement, the SLA, which we only know in detail when you sign it between a big company and a telco provider. But you don't have a real SLA for the user that's detailed enough that you can test it and that you actually own the tools that access the network to prove that the company is doing something bad. And also, we should be able to separate network neutrality from outright censoring, blocking, and filtering, which is, the political side or even the commercial side, and call them by their name in that case.
Okay, I think Ornulf also had some comments on this.
Yeah, just a quick comment from the regulatory aspect.
Which is to say you allow specialised services as long as they do not, should only be offered if the network capacity is sufficient to provide them in addition to internet access services, and they are not to the detriment of the availability or quality of internet access services. And I think you used the phrase, you've got to make sure you have adequate capacity to ensure contractual obligations are upheld on the open access internet. Well, I'm just thinking, in a very banal thought of the situation in the UK, where contracted internet speeds are almost never delivered. So how long is a piece of string, really, is my question. I mean, who decides what is adequate delivery on the open access internet? I still haven't, and I must confess, even though I believe when I voted this text, and I still believe that it's quite good, but I'm not entirely sure what it means in practice. And I really would like to try and search for an answer to that. I mean, presumably it comes back to the regulators, but the regulators, certainly in my country, are not delivering what the users have paid for at the moment.
I wonder if
I got this completely wrong because I don't understand it.
That's what the report says, but you need to look at some other data.
I think Ornulf had a comment.
Yes, just a quick response to, you were talking about the latest draft that was voted in the European Parliament of specialized services, and in that text than it was in the past. So I don't know the details all by heart in the definitions, but at least that is what, at least in our view, it's very important to ensure any ambiguity in the definition so that everyone, both the regulators and the internet service provider knows what they have sort of paying for. But of course, that's a definition thing of how much is enough or not. Should it be 100% or should it be 90, 80, or whatever? That's a definition that needs to be sorted or agreed on, maybe. Thanks.
Excellent. I think Alejandro also had some comment on this.
Thank you, Alejandro Pisanti speaking. Those rules, Madam, are very well oriented in their intention, and also extremely naive in a sense. We are all asking about service level agreements. Basically, we are asking about service levels. Certainly, we want the speeds delivered. Have to look at what we are actually asking for in a best effort network. By definition, I mean, if we insist in getting, guaranteed levels of service, we are going back to circuits. We're going back to telcos. But we, of course, have gotten used to very high levels of service. I would add here very briefly 3 things. One of them, use Netalizer, use Berkeley's Netalizer software for analyzing this, because it really goes through all the ports. It doesn't just measure speed, bandwidth, jitter, and delays.
And also it is worth highlighting that there are some nuances between the extreme version of net neutrality of the 5 alls and not neutrality. I mean, it's like freedom of expression. It is not an absolute right. There are some limits to freedom of expression. Okay, yeah. And I think there are some questions there, the gentleman there, and then, well, up to you to choose.
Thank you. My name is Karan Kazaryan. I'm from Russian Association for Electronic Communications. I want to start with some anecdotal evidence. The place where I live, in Moscow, in fact, I have a choice of 8 broadband providers. 2 of them are DSL, 2 cable, others are fiber.
It would take forever to engage with that.
Yeah. No, I would just say, I think you bring up a great point. It also has to do with, I think that this came up in the last piece, is you can create the perfect free open access network with a low fee, but that still doesn't mean you have this neutrality of content, neutrality of these other things. So, that would be my question is, do the users feel like, they're getting, is the content authentic, for example? So
I think there is a question there. And then I think the gentleman with the pink shirt was before. Sorry? Yes, let's have 3 questions.
I'm Christopher Yu from the University of Pennsylvania. I've been lucky enough to be on the thread planning the main session and heard some of the debates there. And people have argued very passionately for a different conception of network neutrality. Some say it should not just be how traffic is handled within a last mile network, but should extend to interconnection across networks. And other people have circulated a recent report by a French think tank saying it should be platform neutrality, including search engines, iPhone platforms, social networking, and all these other things. And what we've struggled with on that list is to figure out how to appropriately frame the issue. And I would be very interested in the panel's opinion about what the proper scope of the issue we're actually discussing is, because otherwise we risk disagreeing on fundamentally what we're talking about and never actually engaging in the issues itself.
Can we take a couple of
questions? Sorry, just following the... That's right. Hello? Number 2, not working. Hello? Hello? Okay. Hello? Okay. Perfect. My name is João Carlos Caribé. I'm from Movimento Mega from Brazil. I'm an activist for internet freedom. My question is this. Usually, we see the legal, technical, and economical approach on the net neutrality debate. But it's rare to see the humanity approach. Why? I just asked this.
Appearing and how this is harming the internet. when we look at CDNs, we don't see any bias in the network towards CDNs. CDNs is a valid way of distributing your costs. You could build out a CDN yourself, or you can hire somebody. You know, if you like to fly, then build your own CDN. If you like other people to fly for you, then you contract it. So when we try to discuss this at the OECD, we actually try to not mention the word net neutrality. We try to discuss these individual elements, and then it becomes a lot clearer what is meant, and it becomes a lot easier to discuss this. And particularly what we see that yes, you need competition, but competition in infrastructure is limited in the OECD. We've heard that the US has more cable than Europe. Yes, that's based on investments of 20, 30 years ago. We don't see, in most of the OECD, any investment in new cable networks. What is there was what was there 20, 30 years ago. You don't see new cable networks being rolled out, at least not the actual physical infrastructure. You see a bit of boxes changing at the end nodes, but a country like Italy, it didn't do cable networks, and you won't see any new cable networks being built. Hopefully you see a little bit of fiber, but that's the problem that a country like that faces. So making Europe versus US comparisons on that basis is flawed, because the US had 92%.
Users access fairly basic services. They don't access very content intensive or data intensive applications and content. Now, the fact is that many of the issues that that we have discussed so far, things like packet shaping, you know, and you know, some of the other methods used by telcos, wouldn't actually have much of an effect on most of these subscribers. What does actually have you know, a huge impact on them is zero-rated services. And I think that this is the case in a number of other emerging markets as well, particularly in Africa. And I think that zero-rated services also have perhaps in some ways a more profound impact on the way in which people view the internet, because when we're talking about packet shaping and other forms of discrimination, if you want to call it that, they can affect the way in which an existing internet subscriber accesses services and the patterns of use of the internet. Whereas with zero-rated services, it has the ability to affect a person's conception of what the internet is, because many of these people are first-time users. Therefore, I was just interested in...
Could you go to the question, please?
Sure. So my question is whether the panelists view zero-rated services as a violation of net neutrality, or what their view is on that exactly.
Okay, so we will have some quick replies to the questions, and then we will have to wrap up, because I promised to end up on time.
Can I say one thing on India?
Okay.
Just to respond to this on India, you know, I lived in India for 2 years in Hyderabad, and what I had experienced, where a lot of elderly seniors, grandparents, because of so many people of India around the world, and they love to use WhatsApp and Facebook to connect with their grandchildren. And you're absolutely correct that they have a very small view of the internet. On the other hand, if there were not these fun, cool services, they wouldn't get on anyway. They're not going to learn to use a computer, they're not going to learn to program, and that in many ways these kinds of programs are helpful for them to keep in touch with their family, and they offer them a way to communicate. So I know this argument both sides, but that is a perspective that my Indian colleagues have shared with me, is that they like the ability to have this kind of program.
Just one kind of observation here. The internet was designed in a highly diverse environment, and it remains so. It's not a uniform and homogeneous system, and so best efforts is still a really important notion. You can't get more bandwidth out of the channel than the channel can deliver, and the channels are, you know, pretty broadly distributed in terms of their capacity and latency. So I think that the best we can do in the net neutrality world is to try to assure that the users get the best efforts of the network collectively that they could reasonably expect to get. And I know that's not something you could write into the regulations, but that's about all you can truly expect out of this design.
Just very briefly. So thanks for the great set of questions, and I really wish we had more time to talk about all of them. I will just briefly note to the gentleman from Brazil, I like the idea of the human approach, and for me this is cross-cutting. I think we should be thinking about technical, legal, and economics about this from a perspective of the humans, the internet users, and empowering their choices and serving their interests in everything that we do in this. And thank you as well to Professor Yu for his question about scope. It's a big question, and there's not universal agreement. I mean, mine and Mozilla's position has been, we call it network neutrality, first of all, and so for me, the focus is on the neutrality of the operation of the network, and we've been trying to focus it and say, at least in the United States, let's start with just the local access network and the routing of traffic within that. Obviously, there are problems that go beyond that, but let's not conflate them. Let's take a look at them. Let's figure out how to approach each of them. And we just want to start by focusing on the local access network and protecting users there, and then look at everything else.
Excellent. Alejandro, and then I would ask to the panelists to give some final remarks to wrap up.
Thank you. Very briefly to João Carlos Caribe from Brazil, because that sums up the question that we are dealing with. Yes, the human part is what makes network neutrality important. Otherwise, it would just be a technical operation thing that no one would know about. But the thing is, you know, I think that the big step to take in each country, because this varies very much by country, by legal tradition and technical infrastructure, is set up a multi-stakeholder discussion, not multi-stakeholderism as a religion, but, you know, the right stakeholders. And this means bring in the telcos, bring in the ISPs, bring in the government regulator, and so forth. But make sure you have people who understand the technical complexity that lies below the wish of network neutrality. Network neutrality is an important principle. We have to keep it in mind, fight for it, but we cannot do it naively. You have to understand what's going on the lower layers, the things that Christopher Yu has already mentioned and so forth, CDNs, etc., so that you can ask the right questions to get the right answers and to be able to evolve, not fix rules right now forever, but to evolve with the network.
Just to add a little comment, the first report that we issued last year was indeed on human rights and net neutrality and the value of net neutrality for the internet of tomorrow based on a human rights perspective. So that was indeed our starting point, and now we are developing it with the regulatory perspective. So some other remarks? Do you have any remarks to wrap up the panel? So no, if not, okay. So we are finishing right in time. Excellent. So thanks a lot for being here from this excellent discussion. We will have other session to discuss net neutrality. There will be a workshop tomorrow on network neutrality and infrastructure enhancements. You are all invited, and the main session net neutrality tomorrow in the afternoon. You can find, if you didn't manage to have a hard copy here, you can find it on networkneutrality.info, starting from the end of today. And yeah, and I'm also pleased to announce that the Dynamic Coalition has adopted some rules of procedure. So we will have these rules of procedure starting from this week. Thanks, and see you soon in the next sessions.